community servings uses almost exclusively whole grain products, with some exceptions. So we we provide a lot of different meal components. So every time we provide food to a client, they get one delivery of food a week from us that has 10 meals in it, basically the equivalent of 5 lunches and 5 dinners plus some snacks. And for most of our clients, anytime a grain goes into one of those meals, it is a whole grain. So we pretty much only use brown rice, farro, barley, quinoa. Um, I think those are the primary grains that we use. And those would be like a side dish in one of our entrees, or they may be in a soup. We also only, for the most part, use whole wheat pasta, like 100% whole wheat pasta. We do some baking here, and we do make whole wheat rolls, but it's a mix of wheat and white. Important to us to provide whole grains whenever possible for a number of reasons. One is um, we cook everything here from scratch with very rare exception, and we believe that food in its most natural state is when it's at its healthiest. So there's sort of that fundamental belief, and whole grains fit right into that. Whole grains are more nutritious, and they have fiber in them, and they have all the nutrients that all the good nutrients not stripped out of them. So there's that. They also, I would say, I believe the last number was like something like 70% of our clients have diabetes. Most of them have type 2. I think that number may actually even be higher now. But we believe that we can provide individuals with diabetes grains and carbohydrates, but it's better when they're whole because it manages their blood glucose response. So we try to keep our overall carbohydrate content controlled. So for example, a soup that we would provide someone should never have more than like 40 grams of carbohydrates, less if possible. And our entrees, so the protein, the grain side, and the vegetable should never have more than 60 grams of carbohydrates, less if possible. But since we are almost exclusively providing whole grains, there tends to be more fiber. So we feel like even if the carbohydrate's a little bit higher, it still moderates the blood glucose response. The goal with our meals is in general to provide people who are really sick with food that's going to make them feel better and hopefully make them get better. We're not going to cure anybody's illness for the most part with the food we provide them, but we are at least not going to make it get worse and maybe make them control things like their blood sugar. Like we see when folks are on our meals for a period of time, if they have diabetes, we see their A1C drop pretty substantially. If they're being careful about what they're eating outside of the food that we give them. We are not meant to be a program for weight management, but we do see people with that goal manage their weight a little bit. We see people, just feeling better from the food that we're providing them. And we truly believe, like as an agency, it's because we're providing really healthy, scratch-made meals that are, full of good nutrients and very controlled in sodium too, which is, I know we're not talking about sodium, but that is like a big focus of ours, is to really manage the sodium content of the food that we put out there. It's very interesting because what we hear from a lot of clients regarding the whole grain foods that we provide them is that they're unfamiliar with many of the whole grains that we provide to start with. So we get a lot of people who are especially confused by farro and quinoa, I'll be honest with you, and we use those two grains quite a lot, or they've never had brown rice, or they've never had wild rice, which I know is not technically, it is a whole grain, but we do mix it with other grains. And or they've never had like plain barley, for example, and they're confused by this and they're afraid to try it. I would say quinoa is the most confusing grain to someone who is not familiar with it culturally or otherwise. And a lot of times people are hesitant to try things. to just try things that they don't know about or know they've never seen it before. But if we can coach them through it and say, listen, this is just it's a side dish, it's a grain, it's like the white rice or potatoes you've been having, but it's much better for you. Please give it a try. Often if people are willing to try it, they do like it. And now we have people who like prepare it for themselves, for example. It's not always the case, but I will say that if we can get someone to try it and stick with it for a little period of time, they do grow to like the whole grains. They like the texture, they like the flavor, they like knowing it's healthy for them. So we're talking about, adults and older adults who just because it's not culturally part of what they grew up eating or is in their repertoire of how to prepare foods, they're hesitant. I really think the challenge from our end is making the whole grains taste and look good, because let's be honest, that's important. I will be, I'm a dietitian, I eat all the things, but I will be the first to admit that like, a plain bowl of boiled quinoa is not my like most favorite thing to eat. So it's working with our chef and our executive chef here is extremely talented and so good at making healthy things taste really good. But it's making sure that the whole grains we're providing look good and taste good. Showing people how affordable these options can be as well is important. The populations that we work with um, tend to be financially insecure, but when they can see that, whole grains can be really affordable. What has surprised me about working with whole grains the most, just really throughout my career, is how unfamiliar people can be with them and how versatile and tasty they are. So I think it's both things. Like I live in the world of nutrition, and it's easy to lose sight of what people who don't live in this world are familiar with. Um, and I'm still surprised by how unfamiliar with some basic whole grains many people are, just because I don't know, they're not exposed to them. They're not as commercially available. They're not regular parts of restaurant or takeout meals. Like I think there's a lot of places where whole grains could and should be, and they're not. So they're just not part of people's regular repertoire. When you make the healthy choice the default choice, more people will choose it. So if for example, if there is, like in a cafeteria of any kind, a workplace, a school, whatever cafeteria, if the default is the whole grain and you have to ask to get the refined grain, more people are going to choose the whole grain just because it's the default and it's easier and they don't have to talk to someone or make a special request.